This is America, where primary elections are being held across the U.S. Donald Trump is using them to unseat Republicans who've disagreed with him, while Democrats are looking to win over independents. I'll have more on that later, but first over to Neave in our Washington studio.
Thanks, John. A stark message from the voting booths. Recent primary contests from California to Iowa show a deeply pragmatic shift in the American electorate. Voters are increasingly demanding concrete answers on inflation, healthcare and local governance, bypassing culture war politics. But are the party leaders listening? Here's John Hendren again to explain.
In primary elections across the U.S., voters are redefining their priorities, and they're telling the main parties what and who they want in the November elections. Most states have already voted for the main parties, the Democrats and Republicans, and polls suggest the Democrats are likely to take over the House and have a shot at winning in the Senate. And the messages from voters seem pretty clear.
Wherever they are, Democrats want their candidates to fight President Donald Trump on affordability, health care, the economy, and preserving democracy. And party leaders are listening.
You have a lawless president who's being enabled by politicians who will do anything to stay in power. I think that's bad for the democracy.
But primary voters also want to win. In safely blue or Democratic districts, they often opted for progressive, more ideological candidates, like Chris Rabb in Philadelphia, an anti-Israel socialist for the House. But outside the city, where independent voters hold more sway, choosing moderates over progressives. As Trump used the U.S. primaries as a battleground to settle scores with his opponents, Republicans largely stood by their man and his endorsements of candidates like Steve Hilton for California governor.
We're not popping the champagne yet. A majority of Californians think that our state is going in the wrong direction.
By backing their rivals, Trump's endorsement helped end the careers of two sitting Republican senators, Bill Cassidy of Louisiana and John Cornyn of Texas. Their offense? Opposing Trump on key issues. In Texas, Trump's endorsement put Ken Paxton over the top, and some of those cheering loudest are Democrats, who haven't won a statewide race there in more than 30 years.
Insane. A truly insane decision. Ken Paxton is, by every measure, less electable than John Cornyn.
Paxton's baggage? He was impeached as the state's attorney general for corruption and abuse of office, indicted for securities fraud, and faces fire for marital infidelity. Now, Paxton faces the best polling Democrat in recent history in James Tallarico. Trump's endorsements matter because although he's historically unpopular with voters overall, at a lowest on record 37% approval, he's still hugely popular with Republicans at 82%. But Republican voters ignored Trump's picks for governor in Iowa and Georgia, opting for candidates perceived as more electable. In Maine, Democrats chose their own controversial candidate, Graham Plattner, under scrutiny for a tattoo associated with Nazis and sexting women while married. He faces vulnerable Republican incumbent Senator Susan Collins.
Here in solid blue California, Democrats picked mainstream stalwart Javier Becerra over progressives like Tom Steyer, who campaigned on a tax for his fellow billionaires. The message seems clear. For Democrats, at least, in the November elections, electability and pragmatism are more important than ideological purity. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, Los Angeles.
Well, candidates backed by New York's Democratic Socialist mayor have swept the primaries in the state. It's the latest big city to see a left-wing wave sweep across it after the progressives dominated the major primary races in Washington, D.C. The votes in New York were the first real test of Mayor Zohran Mamdani's influence and highlight growing divisions between the grassroots Democrat movements and establishment-aligned figures. Here's how the results were reported by the U.S. media.
And the fringe, it's moving front and center. Democratic Socialists endorsed by Mayor Zohran Mamdani barnstorming last night's New York primaries, and the results seen as a major flashing warning signal for establishment Democrats.
Breaking overnight, a political power play in New York. Democratic Socialist Mayor Zohran Mamdani winning records this morning. 3 endorsements and 3 victories.
We begin this morning in New York. It is a clean sweep for New York City Socialist Mayor Zohran Mamdani, as all 3 Mamdani-backed House candidates winning their primaries, and now they are poised to expand the footprint of socialism across our nation, possibly.
And Kristen Salumi has more now from New York.
New York Democrats prioritized ideology over electability, pushing their party further to the left on Tuesday. 3 congressional candidates who describe themselves as progressive or democratic socialists won in the state's primary elections.
The message is unmistakable. Writing a check and calling it representation is over. You cannot take working people for granted.
All 3 were endorsed by New York's popular new mayor, Zohran Mamdani, in the first test of his influence. The mayor actively campaigned for candidates who were running against Democrats supported by the party establishment.
This is the team.
With his signature-style ads and grassroots get-out-the-vote efforts, the first clear sign of his growing political power since his own surprise victory, driven by young voters frustrated with established candidates seen as out of touch.
What you all have shown this evening, whether for state assembly, state senate, or Congress, is that a year ago, it was not the end of a political movement. It was the beginning.
In a swing district north of the city, where Republicans made gains in the 2024 elections, a more moderate Democrat was elected to represent the party in the general election come November. Kate Conley, a former Army officer who served in Afghanistan and in the Biden administration, will take on Republican incumbent Mike Lawler. His seat is one Democrats are hoping they can flip. But back in the city, Brad Lander, a city politician who supported Mamdani's election, beat out 2-term Congressman Dan Goldman, another indication of the growing criticism of Israel within the party. Like other Mamdani-backed candidates, he campaigned on cutting funding to Israel and ending the genocide, as well as addressing the affordability crisis.
Our party needs to admit that Joe Biden's Hug Bibi strategy was a catastrophic failure. I believe it made us complicit in genocide. Bombs we paid for killed over 70,000 Palestinians, mostly women and children.
A strategy that seems to be working in cities that's yet to be tested in swing districts Democrats will need to win control of Congress. Kristen Salumi, Al Jazeera, New York.
Okay, well, we are joined now by Roger Fisk, a former Obama campaign advisor and Democratic strategist, and by Rina Shah, former senior congressional GOP advisor and also a strategist for the Republicans. Good to have you both here on This Is America. Roger, we've just been hearing about what's been happening in New York. Are the gains for Mamdani and his team, are they a shot across the bow for the Democratic establishment?
We'll have to see. We won't have the proof of concept that we get on the Republican side, which is when the president has a very good record of choosing primary challengers that go and then lose generals, which is why we're not speaking about, for example, a Senator Blake McMasters from Arizona or Senator Oz from Pennsylvania, both of whom Trump backed and then they lost. And what I mean by that is to say they're not necessarily competitive seats. It's essentially like here in D.C., which is if you win the Democratic primary, you're probably going to win that election. Right. I do think the Lawler election that was towards the end of your little setup piece right there is going to be much more indicative. And then it'll also be interesting to see to what extent President Trump truly gets behind Lawler, because Lawler, like a lot of the frontline kind of SALT Republicans, state and local tax Republicans, has had to create a little room between him and the president. So we're going to see. But I don't take the Mamdani 3 primary wins last night necessarily as indicative of a sea change. But that said, they challenged established incumbents in at least one seat. And clearly, that's indicative of some kind of political change or shift.
Okay, well, regarding what's happening in New York, we've also been hearing from senior Republican leader Steve Scalise, who's weighed in on the Democratic primaries. Take a listen.
This move to the Marxist socialist left by the Democrat Party, they've become an unrecognizable party. You cannot recognize who the Democrats are anymore. This is surely not your father or grandfather's Democrat Party. They've fully embraced socialism.
All right, Rina, how do you deal with the Mamdani phenomena in New York, what would be the traditional Republican way of countering that message?
Well, in New York, you really can't deal with it because it's sort of locked up for Democrats in general. So I would say Scalise, Congressman Scalise, his words are pretty spot on about the moment. The party, the Democrats from where I sit, seem pretty unrecognizable if you look at them from just a decade ago. It's a mishmash. They are the party of the elites now. They are the party of celebrities. They're the party of people who are willing to stand next to Israel at any cost, it seems. So that is what Congressman Scalise is talking about. Now, look, you go out and you ask the average Republican what they think of the Democrats today. They'll give you about the same answer they had a decade ago. So this isn't about how people feel about the moment politically so much as what the moment actually represents. And I don't think last night was Zohran Mamdani's night. I actually wish people would stop saying that. I think it was a rage against the machine night.
Okay, a rage against the machine night, an anti-establishment message that could have come from potentially either parties. You know, why do you think there is this apparent quantifiable shift, Roger, away from national political theatre, all the culture war stuff that appears to have polarised this country for perhaps far too long, back to bread and butter issues, cost of living issues, Roger?
Yeah, well, the affordability message is working very well for Democrats right now because the president has not really in any demonstrable way tried to achieve the agenda that he was elected on. For example, take today. No one's going to be inviting me to the White House anytime soon, but think of if the president had actually gone up to Capitol Hill or signed this housing bill wherever he wanted to, and then in the same day announced that they're going to lower tariffs on Canadian lumber and Mexican cement and Mexican sheetrock. That starts to get towards an affordability kind of agenda that can have traction. Then you can send out your surrogates to go push it into second and third tier media markets and things like that.
They can do actual solutions talk. I think that's a really good point that you just made.
It's a policy.
Yeah, because there's not been any solutions talk from the administration so far. And what Roger just offered is a very simple step towards that. But instead, Trump keeps coming out and saying inflation is a hoax. Yesterday, he was in Pennsylvania at a Mack truck plant basically saying, well, we make in America. That used to play really well in Pennsylvania. I'm not sure it's going to anymore. But if the Republicans actually gamed it just the way he said, it's a very simple step. Okay. They have a better chance.
All right. And that is feeding into this whole disillusionment across the board, you suggest.
I was just going to say, but instead, he cancels the bill signing for the housing bill and creates more distance between him and the majority leader, John Thune of the Senate, and gets the Republicans into even deeper or more difficult waters heading into the fall. So you can see his personality is at odds with the agenda.
Okay. And let me ask you this at this juncture then. What about this huge amount of disillusionment we're particularly seeing from Gen Z voters when it comes to the establishment's apparent alignment with Israel, the war in Gaza, claims of genocide, Rina?
Well, another thing you just heard my colleague sort of weave here, and I think it's easy to pick up on because it's so obvious to me, that people are tired of this blame the other party talk. Trump is now well over a year into office. We're over the 100-day mark of the war on Iran, and all he seems to ever do is say, I was dealt a bad hand by the Democrats, by Joe Biden. And so inevitably, different demographics wake up, and Gen Z has woken up, it seems, to saying, well, this guy's back. What's that really mean? That means the status quo is going to just be there. And the status quo has been to be propped up by Israel, to give Israel whatever it wants and needs without any questions. And Gen Z just isn't having that.
Does Gen Z also feel utterly slandered, infuriated by being accused of far-left Marxist politics simply for standing up against, let's say, the killing of children in Israel, Roger?
Yeah, I mean, it's you can understand. One of the things about primaries are much more about harnessing emotion and kind of like the more kind of high intensity elements of some of the issues in some of the constituencies. Which is why, for example, the one group that had the worst night last night was AIPAC of anyone. So I would imagine those folks are all getting around a conference room table saying, like, how do we navigate this general election coming up? But the other thing about Gen Z as well is, I try to think of we spend a lot of time talking about the stories that are happening, but I always think about what are the stories that are not being told right now, which is, why isn't the president going in front of the American people saying, every child who graduates high school by 2030 is going to know how to code. And our community colleges are going to work with the federal government so that they can then train the next generation of the American worker in robotics. Like Gen Z could start to see themselves in that, right?
Right.
And take my Canadian lumber and Mexican sheetrock and concrete. They can see themselves in lowering the cost of housing. But the reflecting pool, declaring that you won every single day in Iran, getting out ahead of Iran and saying that there's an agreement when there's not. Gen Z looks at that as just noise and it's self-celebrating.
Yeah, background static. How do you then capitalize if you are a Democrat or indeed you are a dissenting Republican with the kind of successes seen by Mamdani in New York? How do you scale that message up, a message of hope, which I'm sure you know all about from your Obama years? How do you spread that nationwide, Rina?
It's very simple. You meet voters where they are. Zohran Mamdani did that. And the funny thing about Trump is that 10 years ago, when there was this entire analysis done after he won for the first time, there was talk, and in this town, about how very actionable his messages were, about doing things, actually creating a solution to a problem. That's exactly what Zohran Mamdani did. It's not rocket science. None of us get involved in politics and stay here for as long as we do because it's some great craft you need to learn. You just need to meet voters where they are. And so what are the concerns of the moment? No more new wars, no more forever wars, and let's reinvest in what our problems are right now. Right now, there's a whole generation that cannot afford to have children, that cannot afford a rent or a mortgage.
I hear you. The disillusionment is immense across the board. I want to ask you particularly, Rina, about political meddling, because I think it's fair to say it goes deeper than simply a change in voter attitudes, because there's been a lot of accusations of cross-party meddling. Political campaign groups linked to the Republican Party have reportedly been funding Democratic candidates on the far left of the political spectrum, presumably because they view them as weaker candidates they can field Republicans against. I mean, this isn't a new trick, but it appears to be getting more aggressive, Rina. How do you answer that?
I mean, I'm somebody that worked in politics when Cambridge Analytica was the phrase of the week, or the phrase of the year, rather. So we've come so far away from that. Now, meddling is really out in the open. For example, there is a whole creator class, influencers, if you will, that are digital in nature. And many of them are funded by dark money. And because we allow big money in our politics. And so there is a sense that misinformation and disinformation is coming at us from so many different places that it can't even be stopped. I haven't been a political operative for a long time now. The last campaign I worked was really embedded on was, oh my gosh, I have to really think about it. Presidential 2016, primaries 2021. I can't even tell you how difficult it would be for me to operate on a political campaign today in the capacity I used to, because it is coming at us from all sides and nobody's stopping it. Neither party's wise to it, because guess what? They're way too old to understand the problem.
Roger, let me put that to you. Dark money being used to manipulate the democratic process. It's all about winning, isn't it?
Absolute shocker.
Absolute shocker.
Yeah.
Please elaborate.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be super cloak and dagger and clandestine. I mean, all of a sudden, this mysterious second Dan Sullivan surfaced in Alaska. So if you know that story, there's an incumbent Dan Sullivan, and someone found another one and got him on the ballot. So, and this, I come from Boston. You know, there's the stories of mischief back in the day. I mean, George Washington used to change to a bright, new, well-cleaned white horse before he would ride into a town as president and things like that. So this idea of some kind of manipulation of perception is certainly not new. The difference is the tools, and to her point, is the current legal structure that allows people to spend tens of millions of dollars without any kind of disclosure, without even knowing who's funding it at all. It's tiny little font at the end of the ad that, of course, no one can even see, let alone research.
Let's widen the discussion. Let's talk the Trump factor, because whether it's dark money pulling the strings from the outside or a populist wave tearing it down from within, the traditional political establishment is under siege. Donald Trump apparently doesn't need either of those things, though. This is what he's been saying on Truth Social. Republicans in the Indiana State Senate should be ashamed of themselves, headed by a total loser. Every one of these people should be primaried, and I will be there to help. And this one, Mark Lynch would be a disaster for the Republican Party, and Lindsey Graham just gets the job done. Vote for Lindsey all the way. Rina, Trump's own endorsement just ended the careers of long-serving Republican establishment titans John Cornyn and Bill Cassidy. I mean, what does the powerful Trump endorsement mean for the traditional wing of your party?
It means money. Number one, it means money. It's fundraising prowess you get, number one. And then second, there's a little bit of that sensationalist excitement factor, because you never know what Trump is going to show up and say. And so we were talking at the beginning about Mike Lawler, the congressman from New York, who's a moderate, whose seat is definitely, you know, it's very tough for him to keep. But he somehow cozies up to Trump all the time. And I know he does it for money. He shouldn't do it on a political level, because he probably should distance himself from Trump's rhetoric. It doesn't play that great in his district. But look, this is the time now. It's been cemented. We understand what the Republicans who favor Trump do. They go even cozier with him, and they don't care exactly how he does things. They don't care that he's dirty about it. For example, in South Carolina, actually, he wanted to get rid of Congresswoman Nancy Mace, and he did. She wasn't even a factor. And then he kind of gave his endorsement to the two out of some others, but two candidates. It was like Trump just is not a strategist, and that's okay for these candidates. They are okay because they know that every time the Trump name is on any one of their invitations, they're getting money.
Right. Roger, I mean, there is an exception here. If we look at Iowa, a heavily Trump-endorsed candidate just suffered a decisive defeat there because the local opponent focused on kitchen table issues. Is there a limit to the wand that Donald Trump wields?
Yes, and it largely manifests in the general elections rather than the primaries. Like I said, I think he's been 95 or 96% successful in choosing primary winners, but a lot of those go along to because he tends to pick people that offer him loyalty over policy expertise or any kind of, particular elements of their background, being a small businessman or a farmer or any number of other things. There's the only one thing that he looks for, which is, will you follow me and do whatever I say 100% of the time? Because look at Massey, look at Cassidy, and they were with him, I think 95% of the time. Massey voted with the Trump agenda, and Cassidy voted 97% of the time.
Roger, let me
and
pause
that
you
was
there.
still too much room.
Let me pause you there, because here's what he actually said about Massey. We can play that.
This moron, no matter what it is, Thomas Massey, there's something wrong with him.
He is the worst person. His name is Thomas Massey.
The worst congressman in the history of our country. His name is Thomas Massey. Massey's the worst congressman in the history of our country.
Thomas Massey's a terrible congressman. He's been a terrible congressman from day one. He's really a Democrat.
The rhinos are gone to a large extent. A few of them are still left. Tom Massey, who's horrible.
Who won the Massey thing? He was a bad guy. He deserves to lose.
Rina, not a great time to be Thomas Massey, is it?
I think Thomas Massey is fine. I think he's sleeping well at night because he voted on his principles, really. And he led whatever charge he did in the House on principles. And the charge I'm talking about is the Epstein files. He joined with Congressman Ro Khanna of California to really say, be as open as possible to the DOJ. Give us everything, unredacted. Trump didn't like that. No wonder Trump has the most anger for him. It's all about the Epstein files with Massey. And also Marjorie Taylor Greene and Congresswoman Nancy Mace and Boebert, they also, well, Boebert is still there and she still supports Trump. They also had their heads on the chopping block because of the Epstein files. So that's what it was there. Cassidy, I don't know so much, the doctor from Louisiana who's in the Senate, because guess what? He just voted his conscience this week. He voted for the War Powers Resolution.
Right, very, very last week. We've got about 30 seconds, Roger. I'm curious to know whether character really matters in US politics anymore. You know, we've seen several people beset with scandal, the president himself. Your final thoughts?
I think we live in an age where the campaigns are largely personality driven, which is why this fall you're going to see the candidates' names with a major de-emphasis on party. But everything is cyclical. I do believe American politics are pendulous, and we will come back to a time when character does matter, if you subscribe to the idea that character is destiny.
All right, it's been a pleasure speaking to both of you. Thanks so much for joining us on This Is America. Roger Fisk, former Obama campaign advisor and Democratic strategist, and Rina Shah, former senior congressional GOP advisor and Republican strategist. Well, that's all from the team here in Washington. Handing back to John Hendren at Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha. See you all soon.
And don't forget, you can always catch the latest episode of This Is America Monday through Friday at 18:30 GMT or 11:30 a.m. Pacific if you're here on America's West Coast. Until then, from the whole LA team, bye for now.